Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome panelists representing SHI partners NVIDIA, HPE, Cisco, and Lenovo here for a candid discussion moderated by SHI's Matt Fisher on how to tackle the biggest hurdles in deploying AI, from power and density to security and scalability. Panelists, welcome.
Morning, guys. Please take a seat. So, yes, we have a really interesting panel session coming up where I feel like I'm about to use a load of buzzwords when I'm about to say we're going to dispel a load of buzzwords. So that's what happens when you get the marketing guy hosting a panel session, I think. But we are incredibly honored to be joined by representatives of HPE, NVIDIA, Lenovo, and Cisco. And I'm going to get them to introduce themselves just in a moment so that you know who's who. But really, this next 25 minutes is about exploring the shift to locally run AI, the realities of hybrid infrastructure, and what organizations really need to be doing to future-proof their infrastructure so that they're ready to cope with what's coming. But let's meet our panel first, and we'll start right here.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jason Clark. I work for NVIDIA. I run the channel globally for AI factories. Essentially what that means is I try and do my very best to make the complex easy for you to consume.
So Robin Braun, I'm Vice President of AI Business Development at HPE, and I run the Unleash AI program, where we bring together kind of an innovation ecosystem and toolbox and help solution that for, as I'd like to call it, the art of the how.
I'm Marc Fisher. I'm with Lenovo, and I'm director for our Advanced Computing Solutions team, which focuses on high-performance computing, AI, and next-generation infrastructure.
Hi, everybody. Danny McGinniss. I look after product management for the compute business unit at Cisco. So pretty much think about the entire product life cycle of all of our compute infrastructure. So UCS servers, if you're familiar, Intersight, which is our platform management tools, and then our ecosystem partnerships with folks like NVIDIA.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So a lot of people in the audience have hopefully had the opportunity over, well, yesterday to visit our AI and cyber labs that are just down the road. And clearly, the labs there are designed to show the art of the possible, right? You guys have all invested in putting kit in there, and we're demonstrating what can be done with AI in a data center at the edge, et cetera. But I think the reality for a lot of organizations is that they're probably still running most of their AI efforts in the cloud, effectively. But then there has to be some sort of knock-on effect to the local infrastructure, the on-prem. So, Danny, maybe what's Cisco's view on the impact on your on-prem infrastructure, even if you're using AI in the cloud?
Yeah, I think more and more. So you're right. I think a lot of projects do absolutely start off in the cloud, because that's frankly where we've been used to being for the last decade or so. It was just sort of natural. It's easy. I think it's important to think about data gravity. So it's really around where the data sits. The AI kind of has to follow, or the applications have to follow, and so I guess every decade or so we see the pendulum swing back and forth, and we go from centralized to decentralized. I think we're definitely going back in that direction of decentralization, because performance and latency are so important, and especially because you have to consume so much data. And I think that's driving not just on-prem, but actually more to the edge as well. So it's actually going from centralized into data centers on-prem, because that's where a lot of our data sits. But then now there's a lot of new data being created also at the edge that needs to be monitored, processed, analyzed in real time. And so that's where you're seeing a lot more distribution.
So if we sort of maybe take that forward then, Robin, I know you do a lot of work with Jack Hogan from our team, looking at kind of AI use cases. As people are starting to uncover new AI use cases, are you seeing any kind of instances where they're uncovering these use cases that really suit or maybe don't suit the cloud, that actually you would want to run them in a data center or locally because of the nature of the use case?
Well, I think there's a lot to that, because we're starting to look at how to truly kind of automate day-to-day tasks, not just kind of cool things that you can do. But I think to the point that Danny started with, that people kind of start in the cloud, that's where things started, but there's reasons for not just data gravity, but also data sovereignty, data security, data privacy, particularly when you're looking across working with like compliance and regulatory or regulated fields, where also people have had their data kind of on-prem. exposing that to the cloud, it's not necessarily economically viable as you look to scale out to, and when you think about inferencing at enterprise scale, when you start to do that in a cloud basis, like those tokens add up really quickly. And that bill suddenly has like more zeros in it than you were necessarily expecting. But what we really are finding from a number of our customers is it doesn't make sense to shift their data for all of the sovereignty, security, privacy reasons. Being able to bring the intelligence and the algorithm to the data is what's so impactful.
I'd like to add something to this because it's really, really important. And I think Brian was an excellent person to have to go ahead of us because the explosion of use cases in the enterprise is really driving the need to have an elasticity story, a hybrid multi-cloud story. A single use case was where our customers started in the cloud, but that has exploded to the need to have the elasticity and the ability to do both training and inference. And that is what is driving customers to look for a solution to have on-prem, right? And that's where you get the value of having the right infrastructure in the right location, and you still have a hybrid multi-cloud story. And the question I love to ask of our customers, right, and our shared customers, and it's 3 simple questions that you can ask of a CIO, and that is, what is the #1 priority that they have in the company, right? What is their cloud, what is their spend for GPU resources, and they'll know this, right? And then the 3rd question, which no one is able to answer, because they started out with a single use case in the cloud, and then it has just blown up, and what Brian shared on that slide with all the individual teams doing GPU resources, is the 3rd question that I love to ask, and that is, how much of the GPU resources that you are spending today is going towards your #1 priority program in the company? And no one has been able to ask that. And so this idea of moving the resources back that we're talking about on the panel today, right, gives you the visibility to monitor those resources and then apply the security, right, that Robin was talking about, but then also apply scheduling across the different multi-tenancy in terms of the VU, so you can actually ensure that you understand what resources you're giving to what program, what team. And that's hugely important going forward.
So, Marc, I need to bring you into the conversation, and I think Danny, Robin, and Jason have just given us all good reasons why you would want to perhaps run AI more locally. I'm going to give you first shot, but I'm going to give the others a shot at this as well. But yeah, what are the vendors like Lenovo and the others doing to actually make that more attractive and more achievable for the customer?
I think going back to the comment on cost per token, that's really something that a lot of organizations are starting to consider much more of, tying it back to the actual enterprise use case. How much does it cost to get into that and focus on that specific problem, specific example? Ultimately, from a Lenovo perspective, we focus very heavily on the infrastructure itself, building the entire solution around it, and making sure that it's sustainable. That's a very big and large focus from Lenovo's perspective, whether it be using liquid cooling or creating a product that is sustainable into the future, utilizing air cooling, and making sure that is much more sustainable.
Robin, I feel like I need to give you almost like a right of reply, so we're not only hearing the Lenovo view.
And I think one of the things that Jason was talking about is that we really do believe it's a hybrid model. That people aren't going to completely leave the cloud, but people aren't going to completely leave their on-prem either. So how do we really create that hybrid experience? And I think what all of us are trying to do is to do that, and that's where like working in partnership with NVIDIA, we've done things like private cloud for AI, where you can essentially try to bring that experience, but bring it on-prem, but still have that metering, still have the NVIDIA blueprints easily accessible, and still be able to do that, as well as in even scaling out to like sovereign AI factory. And looking at that it's a choice depending on where all of our customers are, whether it's kind of roll your own with our compute, whether it's that private cloud for AI where you can lifecycle the whole AI stack, or out to kind of thousands of GPUs at a time. that everybody's on a different scale and a different kind of trajectory of how they're using it, and we're trying to give choice.
So, Danny, if I bring that over to you then, if we've got people in the audience that are, let's say, fully in the cloud because they're in that sort of piloting, playing with it stage, and they're sort of saying, I'm not sure how I get this into the hybrid model or I bring it on-prem. What would you guys recommend in terms of an action plan?
Yeah, so I mean, when we think, obviously this is something, especially coming from the product management side when we're thinking about the portfolio, something we spend a lot of time talking about, and I think it's really important, is about how do we really make this achievable and realistic for the enterprise. And so I think the first thing is you have to think about the hardware. Obviously, all of our portfolios have had to change and expand to where you can't forget about the traditional side. I think the most important piece, when I talk to so many customers, we just came out of our customer advisory board last week, and it's like you can't ignore traditional, right? We're not going to just jump in and everything's going to be on an AI server. So you have to bridge those two. It's not just bridging public cloud, it's also bridging on-prem. So for us, it's about expanding the portfolio so that we still can manage and give you flexibility and choice in terms of the traditional workloads and that modernization effort that needs to happen, because you're trying to get back as much power and cooling and space as you can. So there's this collapsing of what you have on the traditional side to allow room for your AI to start to come in. The second piece is the operating model, I think is so important. And so, I mean, we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that our most highest density 8-way GPU, HGX architectures are managed and operated the exact same way that our smallest edge box is operated, so that you shouldn't have to change a single thing. And so I think that's really important, is that the operating model doesn't shift. And then lastly, from a solutions perspective, we spend a lot of time with with NVIDIA right now, working on this concept of a secure AI factory. And so for us, that's validated designs of the entire stack. It's not just the infrastructure, but it's the ecosystem partners that go with it, and giving you solutions and validated designs. Work really closely with SHI on that. But then extending that into, okay, great, we've set up AI infrastructure, but there's all these other services that have to come in. You need observability, you need security. They're more centralized, just like we have in our data centers today. And helping our customers understand how to bring those into and build this new, pretty much creating like an on-premise experience that you would get in the
Danny, you just talked about the AI factory. Robin, you're probably the most experienced in our labs because I've seen you been there a lot.
Can I add something to this? Because I think we kind of glazed over something that is incredibly important, and it's part of everyone's solution that's on stage. And I know this. You mentioned it's going to be streamed on LinkedIn, right? So Jensen would be really, really happy that everyone led with infrastructure, right, as their lead-in. But the really important piece that was glazed over was thinking through the software stack, right? You need to think through the application layer, right? So you can go to any of the CSPs, and what you build, right, you can run at any of the CSPs or run on-prem, right? And so that's where NVIDIA AI Enterprise, which is part of everyone's solutions on stage, right, is supported across every major CSP, right, and runs on-prem and runs on every piece of NVIDIA GPUs, right? So regardless of where you start, whether it's in the cloud or you start on a DGX Spark, right, what you build from day one, right, can scale with you from a Spark to the CSP to a SuperPod, right? And that's incredibly crucial, because that's where customers today that start with a single use case and don't think about how it's going to scale, and AI is scaling so rapidly today that they start with SageMaker and they get to a place where they go, okay, look, costs have exploded in my company. Now how do I go and optimize, right, spend? And they are stuck because the shadow IT, or I forgot what Brian called it, right?
Shadow AI.
Shadow AI, right? Now how do I take all of these disparate projects, right, and then consolidate them? And it becomes a really, really, really hard problem for a partner like SHI to go solve, right? And so if you're just starting out, right, making sure that you start, and I like to think of it as like a family, right? You want a family of applications that are all coherent together, right? And that's where, if you start with the application, you start with NVIDIA AI Enterprises, that's what I'm going to build my solutions on, right? You know, obviously the hardware is important, right, and thinking through it, but I really want you to leave with, don't think of a single use case. Yes, that's sexy. I'd love to talk to you every day about a NIM blueprint that solves a very specific problem, but start thinking through, yes, multiple use cases is where you're going to go. Start at the application layer, because that's going to allow you to build out this entire strategy for your AI factory, AI center of excellence, and it will allow you to build this elastic, right, solution, right, that is a hybrid multi-cloud story, right? And if you do it right in the beginning, it'll be faster time to market, right, better ROI, and it'll save you a ton of money, and it'll allow you to deploy security protocols and all of the things that we're talking about across all of your programs in a much more consistent way.
Yeah, the portability of applications. I mean, we're seeing a lot of customers start in the cloud, use that as a sandbox, realize the test case is playing properly, move it on-prem, scale it really exponentially, and then at some point move it to the edge ultimately for inference. And that at that point, considering latency is very important. So you need to make sure that you can easily port your applications across different locations. Not everybody's going to end up in one specific cloud. Not everybody's going to end up on-prem. So you really need a lot of flexibility, and these new age workloads expect that.
We'll sell you the right GPU at the end of the day, right? Based on your application, I promise, right? But don't start there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to that's part of why, like when I'm looking and building out the Unleash AI program, that is one of the major considerations is the partner able to be flexible to, you know, what you were saying on, can they run in the cloud, can they run on-prem, and being able to have that portability from an application level to on that software side, so that regardless of where they want to run it, they can have that seamless portability.
100%.
So Robin, I mentioned that I wanted to come to you because I know you've been in the labs a lot. It sounds to me like what you guys are just discussing is one of the things that we're trying to solve for in our labs. We're trying to allow our customers to play with the software stack and the infrastructure to explore on-prem versus cloud, et cetera. Is that what you've experienced? Do you kind of see that that's what SHI is trying to bring to these customers in the room?
Well, one of the things that I love about what you're doing in the lab and where, you know, SHI has brought such great focus is on the, you know, imagine, experiment, and adopt. And that really is such just a mantra that I see from the approach that you all are taking, is being able to help the customers on that journey. And again, talking about what is keeping you up at night. What are you trying to solve? Kind of to your point, Jason, before diving right into the coolest, newest GPU, which we all know it's there. But that being able to help you have that conversation, to think through some of the pitfalls we're talking about before you get started, so that you can start imagining, but you can start experimenting. And I think that hands-on capability, that ability to iterate quickly and in a kind of safe environment, and thinking through the, like to the points Marc was making around not just today, but as you scale out, as you look to grow, how could this potentially be used? What are the impacts to your environment, so that you're set up for success day one, and that you can just kind of go on that rocket ship rather than having to retool it in, you know, in 6 months. So I think that's one of the reasons that, you know, I love being in the lab, but I really am just a geek at heart. But really love what SHI is doing.
Thanks. Marc, I want to take a slightly different tack and get away just from infrastructure just for a second. And I kind of noticed that Lenovo just announced the ThinkStation PGX, I think it's called, which I think is, you know, a Spark-like device. How's that going to change how these guys get into AI at scale? Does it have an impact on like how we're going to be playing with and adopting AI?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's going to let a lot of researchers' experiments happen right at the edge, right at a researcher's desk, at a very attractive price point. You're putting a supercomputer on your desk. Think of the possibilities that are there. To your point, imagining what's possible. I'd love to say that every customer and all of our executives are greenlighting every AI project, but they really want to see what's possible, and they want to see the benefits that could come from it. And utilizing a edge platform like the DGX Spark, our platform built on NVIDIA's technology is extremely impactful to give fuel to that rocket ship right away, which I think will unleash some of those art of the possible very quickly and create some experiments that, yeah, might crash and burn, but you will learn that very, very quickly.
So let's get back to infrastructure, because I think the Spark devices are sort of coming online, right? Yeah, I think November time we're expecting them to actually drop and sort of brag for SHI. I think we're one of the first resellers to be able to provide those. So get your Spark devices here, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But let's move back to infrastructure just for a second. There's been a lot of talk about security. You talked about the software stack, but Danny, let's come to you for a second. What are the vendors doing themselves to help secure the infrastructure and the data?
Yeah, so I started to allude to this concept of a secure AI factory work. You're seeing NVIDIA talk a lot about an AI factory. I think at Cisco we've tried to say, well, let's take that and extend it to a secure AI factory. And the idea being is, so once you decide that you're going to move an application on-prem, that's one step. We just talked about why some of that is happening. Then there's this reality that kicks in, be like, oh man, have I secured the application on-prem properly? And do I have the right level of analytics, meaning observability capabilities, so they can provide SLAs? This is no different than any other application we run on-prem. It's just a new workload or a new type of workload we're putting in the data center. And so for us, that concept has been pretty much from the start of rebuilding infrastructure. We've tried to also simplify and reduce your time to market in order to start running applications as quickly as possible. Really, if you think about it, at this point in time, Robin alluded to it, like what's the biggest value we can bring to you between us and a partner like SHI? It's really about getting you up and running as quickly as possible so that you can get focused on what the application is going to do for your business. And so we've put a lot of effort into trying to get you AI-ready infrastructure stacks that are secure themselves. So there's the security posture of the infrastructure. There's also how do we secure the models themselves? So you'll hear Cisco talk about products like AI defense, which is actually where we're looking for bad actors, intruders, and things that are happening, injection prompts and things that are happening in AI models themselves today. And then lastly, there's the how do you secure the network and all of the back and forth communication that have these new traffic patterns in your data centers. And so I think you really have to think about it that way. And that's really what we mean when we talk about a secure AI factory, is all three of those vectors.
Right.
I'll bring this home a little bit, right? Because I think this is really important, where our partners add value and where NVIDIA plays and where SHI plays and where the partners on stage play, right? As we build and define an AI factory through our enterprise validated RAs, it's really the reference architectures in terms of how we build it and make our applications run as efficiently and optimal as possible, right? And make it, as I led my introduction, was make it as easy as possible. And I do a massive disservice to everyone in the room, because these are incredibly complex HPC systems that just a few years ago took years to stand up in the national laboratories, right? And I'm trying to stand them up in months in enterprise, right? That is what we are trying to do from an AI factory perspective, right? Is these standard reference architectures that all of our partners can take and leverage. But when we talk about security, I'm going to try and bring it back to what Brian was talking about, is leveraging chatbots. Security, think about this in a way that you guys would understand. What if I took Grok Unhinged, right, and applied that to your chatbot that was dealing with customer interactions, right? That's the type of security, right, that Danny's talking about, that needs to be applied, right, in an organization to make sure that the person who's doing that isn't doing your services chatbot and deploying Grok Unhinged to be answering the phone calls for you, right? That's the type of security, right, that SHI, right, and in this case, right, Cisco can go and deploy for you, right? And those are the things that when you think about AI and security need to be not just security from a networking perspective, but security in terms of the models that you're looking at deploying, the number of resources you're deploying to some of these new models. You want to make sure that the individuals inside of your organization are deploying the resources to the right models and not deploying them in the wrong way, right, or using them in the wrong way. So I would I mean, I would laugh if I called and got Grok unhinged, right, for a service problem, right? But, you know, obviously that could problem.
85% of AI projects fail because they have to go through all of these phases until they're actually production ready. And at some point, a CISO comes in and looks at it and says, wait a second, you did all this great work, but what's the security posture look like? And so I think Robin was talking about looking ahead. I mean, all of us are really trying to say, hey, we've been here. This is all new for you. Let us try to look 10 steps ahead so that you can actually be up and running and have successful projects. And I think that's really what all of our jobs are in order to help you look around the corner and see what's coming.
So I feel like this conversation could go on a lot longer, but I can see a countdown clock that is telling me we are almost out of time. So what I'd love to do is just to come to each of you in turn and maybe get like a 30-second soundbite of what's the one key takeaway that you would want to leave this audience with as they kind of consider their AI journey from I say this point forward, accepting they're all at different points on that journey, but you know, what's the most important thing to be considering in the next 12, 18 months? Jason, do you want to kick us off?
I'm going to say it again. Don't think about a single use case. Think past the single use case, right? Think about the application layer. Make sure you're thinking about elasticity.
Yeah, I think it's thinking about how do you want to use your data, what is keeping you up at night, and then we can figure out how to help you get there.
Mark?
I think you touched on exactly what I was thinking. The data you have, is it ready? Is it available? Where is it? Don't make it complicated. Pick some low-hanging fruit and jump from there.
All right, Danny. Well, we've stolen 3 of your ideas. So which one are you going to?
I was going to say I agree with everything there, but I'll throw a curveball on you. I think the biggest recommendation that I make that I see happen too often. Brian talked about this concept of shadow AI. It's happening all the time. If you're an IT practitioner, you're probably getting involved very late in the process because lines of business, these new AI practitioners are very early on coming up with new ideas that the business had never thought about. But what happens is they start to become real, and you have to put SLAs on top of it, and you have to operate it at scale, and it has to align with the rest of your data center and all the things that you do if you're on the IT side of the house. If you're not involved early, you will just end up with pockets. Every line of business, every department will have their own AI app that they want to run, and ultimately someone else becomes responsible. So trying to get ahead of that and bridging the gaps between traditional IT teams, lines of business, AI practitioners, data scientists, and getting a company-wide plan is probably my biggest recommendation, and looking ahead so that you have all your bases covered. This does not happen overnight. This is a journey that takes quite a bit of time in order to get right in your environment.
Congratulations, Danny. You get the longest answer of the year. Thank you for that. Look, I'm sure that Jason, Robin, Mark, and Danny are all going to be with us for a bit longer today. So if you see them hanging around and you want to challenge them on any of the responses that they gave, I'm sure they'd love to have that conversation with you. But for now, please join me in thanking our panel.